It is our honor to begin with a keynote speech delivered by Professor Ahmet Davutoğlu, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Turkey. Your Excellency, we kindly invite you to the stage to deliver your keynote address.
My dear friend, Prime Minister Mesut Barzani, Excellencies, dear friends from Iraq, and all the guests visiting Dehok for this excellent conference. First, I want to express my thanks and gratitude to Kak Mesut, to Nechirvan Barzani, and of course to Mesut Barzani for inviting me second time for this very special forum. And I also congratulate all the organizers for this excellent performance during these sessions. It is very timely. This forum is very timely from two perspectives. Yes, a new Middle East emerging, but which type of Middle East we are talking about? Secondly, after the Iraqi election, that would be the first meeting of several Iraqi leaders whom I know. All of them are my very close friends in the past. So I wish full success to all political leaders of Iraq for establishing an inclusive government in Baghdad and a close cooperation and coordination between KRG and government in Baghdad. From Ankara, from Istanbul, when Turkish government, whoever is in the government, but personally for me, if there is a peace, if there is a prosperity in Iraq, it is like our prosperity. I don't see any difference. Yesterday I was proud, I mentioned to Brother Mesrur, observing huge developments, positive developments, economic developments in Kurdistan region, especially in Zaho. I think it is the success of Brother Mesrur, how things are changing. What we need now is success stories. Let me start first just to challenging the title. The title is Managed Chaos, New Middle East. This is our problem. If I would design this forum, I would say achieving cosmos, achieving order, the new Middle East. From our region, many statesmen, thinkers, we are all dealing with the crisis. And we are all reactionary. Crises are emerging, we are trying to contain crisis. Crisis management is important. I am telling this based on my own experience in the past as mediator on different fields, between different Iraqi groups inside Iraq, between Lebanese groups during Lebanese presidential election in 2008, between Palestinians in Balkans, in Central Asia. But I know what are the dynamics of crisis management. Crisis management is important to control the existing situation, but crisis management cannot define the future. For future, we have to have a vision. Crisis management is only meaningful if you have a paradigm in your mind. Therefore, I would say not managed chaos, but achieving cosmos, order. From my own experience, let me share. Until we came to power in 2002, when I wrote my book, Strategic Debt, Turkish all foreign policy during Cold War was based on 3 crisis points. Turkish diplomats, Turkish statesmen, they were wasting their energy on dealing with problems with Greece, problems with Russia, problems with Armenia, and Kurdish issue in general. This was not a constructive paradigm. What we tried to achieve, and I personally what I tried to achieve is to develop a constructive paradigm. When I said zero problems with with our neighbors, I knew, I am a historian, there cannot be zero problem in human life. But if you show a target for your nation, that your neighbors are not your enemies, they are your historic, existential surroundings, then you can achieve a new paradigm. Now again, we are dealing with crisis. Therefore, first, there is a need of a revolution in our mentality. We should be focused on crisis management to contain, but we should orient our mentality for the future? Which type of new Middle East we want to achieve? Let me say first about Psychospico. Kak Mesut, when he made reference to Psychospo, he was right. After 110 years now, many people are complaining and blaming on Psychospico. Yes, we have full right to blame. What did Psychospico? Which type of problems did Psychospico? I would suggest if I had chance to train statesmen in our region, I would ask them to read more on what happened from Psychospico until Second World War when Syria, Iraq as independent states did emerge. Many of us, we do not know the details. Of course, I cannot talk on these details. But one day, maybe on another occasion, we can do. I know my limits of time. But at the end of the day, Psychospico created discontinuities in our region. Throughout the centuries, Aleppo and Mosul and Diyarbakir, Basra and Baghdad and Damascus and Tripoli, they were all integrated. Silk Road, economic cooperation, cultural coexistence. I can mention one whom I like very much, Avi Shleim, a Jewish professor at St. Antonius College. I think Professor Rogan was here. Avi Shleim calls himself Baghdadi. He's from a Jewish background in Baghdad, and he wrote a book against Israel genocide in Gaza. And whenever we meet, he was praising the plurality of Baghdad. So what did Psychospico? Psychospico cut our relations, links, natural historical links between communities, societies, tribes, sects, religious communities. And they try to, after colonial revolution, we want to achieve a new Syria, a new Iraq. But now this is the challenge. Geopolitical, geoeconomic, geocultural discontinuities are the reasons for the problems of today. First, we have to see this. Not as a Turk, not as a Kurd, not as an Arab or Iranian, or Muslim and Christian or Sunni and Shiite. We have to understand, without re-establishing geoeconomic, geopolitical, geocultural links among us, there cannot be peace. We will be dealing only to contain the crisis. Brother Hoshar mentioned our joint efforts in the past. How many crises did we manage, Brother Hoshar? But did we achieve an order at the end? We managed. Now it is not time of management of crisis. It is time to create a new strategic vision for a new Middle East. This should be our objective. Which type of scenarios we have in front of us? There are three scenarios to challenge Psychospico. Two of them will create more chaos. The last one will create a cosmos, an order in the region. I fully agree with Sheikh Hamis and some of our friends in the previous session about regional ownership. The first one is a new atomization of our region. Psychospico atomized, divided our region. There are certain projects, especially by Israel and those who want to have small unities, small states, not strong states or strong nations around, dividing more and more. Like Syria today is a big challenge. Throughout of my life, diplomatic efforts, I tried to do everything during Bashar Assad time and afterwards during civil time to keep Syria together. And if now Syria is being divided into 3 or 4 portions, who will gain? Neither Kurds, nor Arabs, nor Turkomen, nor Alevites or Durzis. Nobody will win. Only one country will win, Israel. Israel wants divided, more atomized region. If Israel wants to exist in this region, they have to respect nationalities. They have to respect first Palestinians. They have to respect human dignity. Today, yesterday, there was a UN Security Council resolution submitted by US. I think this is a shame for United Nations. I wrote a letter to Chinese President Xi and another letter to President Putin, asking them to act as equal P5 like United States, No person in this region can own any part of this region. Of course, ceasefire is important. Of course, we don't want massacres, genocide continuing. But if there is a UN Security Council resolution, doesn't make any reference to UN Security Council Resolution 242, 181, and several others, without mentioning Palestinians' right of existence as a state, without mentioning Palestinian self-determination, it will create more and more chaos. We have to be avoiding any new dismantling or atomization. Second negative scenario, which will create more problems, is hegemonic tendencies. Hegemonic. Try to change psychospiko in the interest of one nation only. Saddam tried this and invaded Kuwait. But what happened? He lost, and Iraq lost. Bashar Assad tried to do this in Lebanon. Several times I warned him, do not intervene in Lebanon, help Lebanon. But at the end of the day, Bashar Assad had to leave because you cannot fight your people. You cannot be having an hegemonic approach in other countries. Now Israel is doing the same thing. Israel wants to be a hegemonic power, controlling South Lebanon, South Syria, controlling and eliminating West Bank. Netanyahu openly declares that there will be no Palestinian state. And nobody says, shut up. There will be a Palestinian state one day. Nobody says this. I was mediator between Ehud Olmert and Bashar Assad in 2007. We were very close to peace. But that peace was peace of equals. But now, President Trump wants to impose a pro-Israeli new order in the region. If Israel wants to be seen as equal state like others, they have to respect the Palestinians. These hegemonic attitudes, whoever makes a greater Iraq by Saddam, a greater Syria by Bashar Assad, dominating Jordan, dominating Lebanon, now a greater Israel by Netanyahu, these hegemonic tendencies will create more problems. Some people called me as neo-Ottoman. I never, my Kurdish friends, my Arab friends know very well, I never propose any hegemonic policy of Turkey or any other country. We have to respect to Kurdistan. We have to respect to Iraq. We have to respect to Syria. It is their business. These two options, atomization and hegemonic tendencies, will create more chaos. And we cannot manage this chaos. That will create more problems. What is the solution? In my academic and political and diplomatic life, I always first try to construct my mind before crisis management. The solution is a new Middle East will and should emerge through geopolitical, geoeconomic, geocultural reunion of Turks, Kurds, Arabs, Iranians, Shiites, Sunnis, without atomization and hegemonic power. How can it be achieved? We have to respect the territories. But territories must be flexible through economic cooperation and through cultural integration. The best way to achieve an order in the region is economic interconnectedness. Brother Hoshiyar and many of our friends from Iraq remembers, in 2009 we signed 51 agreements with Iraq. That was the first time in the region 2 states had joint cabinet meeting. We have to integrate. And today I call all Iraqi leaders from Kurdistan, from Sunnis, Shiites, from Basra to Erbil to Dahok to Zaho. You should integrate. Do not alienate each other. Embrace each other. You need each other. Your ancestors were together for centuries. They didn't ask their neighbors, are you Shiite, are you Sunni, are you Kurd, are you Arab or Turkoman? Yes, there is a state of Iraq, we have to respect territories, but that state can survive only with one important principle, inclusivity. Saddam tried to exclude Kurds and made massacres in Halabja, but he did not survive. There should not be repetition of the history. Nobody should monopolize all the power. In my country also, I emphasize this, that there should be the basic principle of a new national regional order is inclusivity. Inclusivity and regional ownership. This region belongs to us, to Kurds, to Arabs, to Turks, to Iranians. We will work hand in hand. We will work together. We don't need any other foreigner to come and solve our problems. If we have this conscious, others will respect us. If each of us try to use a global power to be hegemonic power in our region, they will not respect us. They will use us. I am not against any other country. As a foreign minister in the past, I had excellent relations with everybody. But since we do not intervene business of other regions, they should not intervene, they should help. In Syria today, I am calling my government as well. Turkey should mediate between Syrian Kurds and Ahmed al-Shara government. We should not be idle. There should be a new Syria based on mutual interest. Also in Turkey, I have been supporting this peace process, called peace process, free terror Turkey. Last year I was here in the same session with Brother Hoshar, and I had very fruitful meetings with several times. This is my third time coming to Kurdistan. Excellent meetings. To be frank, whenever I went to Turkey, I wrote letters to Erdogan, President Erdogan and Bahçeli, encouraging them to finalize this process as early as possible and be sure that Kurdistan regional leaders, they are all supporting this process. And I made one suggestion to them. They start to use. I said, don't say terror-free Turkey. Say terror-free Middle East, terror-free region. Turkey cannot be free of terror if there is a terrorist activity in the neighborhood. We have to, even now during lunch, leader of DEM party, Tuncer Bakırhan, was calling me and some of our members of parliament. A very critical session is continuing Turkish parliament right now in the commission. And I urge everybody in Turkey to be as fast as possible in the right direction to solve this problem forever. Because if you delay a process, many interventions may occur. I don't want to take your time. I want to listen, Brother Fuat Hussein. In short, my suggestion is, in next session, next year, Brother Mesroor, the title should be A New Order in the Middle East. Not chaos, a new order in the Middle East by Turks, by Kurds, by Arabs, by Iranians, by the leaders, wise leaders of the region. We lost enough millions of brothers and sisters everywhere in the region. We have to come together. Otherwise, there will be more chaos. Thank you very much.
حاضر وجه.
تعتك.
دايما حاضر. مساء الخير. نجتمع اليوم في النسخة السادسة من منتدى السلام والأمن في الشرق الأوسط تحت عنوان إدارة الأزمات في الشرق الأوسط الجديد. عنوان يبدو واقعياً إلى حد القسوة حين ننظر إلى منطقتنا، لكنه يصبح أكثر وضوحاً وواقعية حين نسأل أي بلد خير مثال على العيش في قلب هذه الأزمات غير العراق. العراق الذي عاش في مهب العواصف منذ عقود، من حكم البعث إلى حربي الخليج الأولى والثانية، من ظل صدام إلى ما بعد صدام، من صعود الفصائل بين مقاومة وميليشيات إلى الحرب على داعش، وصولاً إلى الحشد الشعبي وفصائل أهل الحق وكتائب حزب الله. كل ذلك بينما يحتضن على أراضيه إقليماً يقدم نموذجاً مختلفاً من الأمن والاستقرار والتعايش والسلام. إقليماً يبدو وكأنه كوكب خارج مجرة الأزمات المتلاحقة. يسرني أن أرحب بمعالي الوزير فؤاد حسين وزير الخارجية العراقي. وقبل أن أبدأ هذا الحوار أتوجه بالتحية إلى كاك مسرور برزاني رئيس حكومة إقليم كردستان أولاً على هذا التنظيم المميز لمنتدى مميز، وثانياً والأهم نحن نتكلم عن الأمن والسلام ونوجه لك التحية على الأمن والسلام والاستقرار الذي نعيشه في الإقليم نحن كأجانب ومقيمين. شكراً وتحية من القلب لك. دكتور حسين، نعود إلى محور هذا اللقاء وعددنا مراحل مر فيها العراق. اليوم نحن في مرحلة جديدة ومزعجة لبعض العراقيين حين نقول أن العراق اليوم أصبح في مرحلة أنه يشار إليه كذراع إيرانية، كما يشار إلى حماس في غزة، إلى حزب الله في لبنان، وإلى الحوثيين. قديش بيزعجك أن يتحول العراق إلى أحد الأذرع الإيرانية في المنطقة؟
طبعا مساء الخير جميعا، وأيضا أود أن أشكر دولة رئيس الوزراء الأخ مسرور برزاني لدعوتنا لهذا المؤتمر المهم، وتحياتي للجميع وأيضا للمشاهدين في قناة شمس. طبعا السؤال اللي جنابك طرحته أنه عراق كذراع لدولة أخرى، هذا مو صحيح، هذا مو صحيح، هذا رأي الآخرين. ولكن هل هناك تأثير للدول الأخرى وخاصة الدول المحيطة بالعراق، يعني دول الجوار الجغرافي على الوضع السياسي في العراق؟ الجواب نعم. فهناك فرق واضح وفرق كبير بين أن تكون ذراعاً وأن يكون هناك تأثيرات على الوضع السياسي العراقي.
كيف يؤثر هذا النفوذ على الأمن والسلام في العراق؟ يعني عندما نتكلم عن النفوذ الإيراني، هل هو نفوذ سلبي إيجابي؟ الكثير يشتكي، الإعلام العالمي يشتكي من العراق لم يعد دولة ذات سيادة حقيقية.
يجب أن نكون واضحين أنه الوضع الأمني في العراق الآن جيد. محتمل المقارنة اللي يصير، وأنا أقارن الوضع الأمني بالداخل العراقي، يعني بعد التغيير كان هناك حوالي لمدة سنة الوضع الأمني الناس يترقبون ماذا سوف يحدث. أنا أتحدث عن 2003 إلى 2004. لكن في 2005 و6 الصراع الطائفي بدأ، وخاصة في بغداد. من كان اسمه حيدراً يقتل، ومن كان اسمه عمراً يقتل. فالصراع الطائفي استمر في العراق لسنتين 3 سنوات، وبعد ذلك كان العراق في مواجهة القاعدة، والعصابات الإرهابية، إلى ما وصلنا إلى داعش. ففي 2014 الإرهاب سيطر على نينوى، وسيطر على صلاح الدين، وسيطر على أنبار، ووصل إلى جنوب بغداد، ووصل إلى مخمور، جنوب مخمور. والعمليات الإرهابية استمرت إلى 2017. في الواقع من 2018 أنا أعتقد أن الوضع الأمني في العراق تحسن، والآن ليس من الصحيح أن نقول أن الوضع الأمني سيء في العراق، بالعكس. يعني كان في أيام مختلفة في بغداد 20 سيارة مفخخة، الآن اذهب إلى بغداد أو إلى المدن الأخرى. فالوضع الأمني أنا أشوفه وضع جيد، لكن هناك توترات في المنطقة، وتوترات في المنطقة وأيضاً حروب في المنطقة. توترات في المنطقة والحروب في المنطقة تؤثر على الوضع الأمني العراقي.
ولكن ما بتعتبر أنه هذه التوترات اليوم في المنطقة ناتجة عن وجود ميليشيات مسلحة داخل الأنظمة السياسية التي يعني اليوم عم نسمع من الأمريكيين كلام واضح في المنطقة: لن نتعامل إلا مع جيش نظامي واحد، لن تنعمون بالاستقرار والأمن طالما هناك ميليشيات مسلحة خارج إطار الدولة. كيف نحل هذه المسألة؟
مسألة الفصائل هاي مشكلة عراقية أولاً. أنا أشوف مسألة الفصائل أولاً مشكلة عراقية ومشكلة تتعلق بالدستور العراقي. إذن يجب معالجة هذه المسألة داخلياً، وليس لأن الأمريكان عندهم موقف معين أو دولة معينة عندها موقف معين تجاه هذه الفصائل. هذه الفصائل مشكلة عراقية ويجب معالجتها، لأن ما ممكن أن يكون لدينا الدولة ولا دولة، هذا ما ممكن. فإذا الاتجاه أنه تقوية الدولة، وأنا أشوف أنه الديمقراطية وتترسخ يوم بعد يوم. والآن دخلنا نتائج الانتخابات السادسة في العراق. احنا إذا ندرس تاريخ العراق، خلي أرجع إلى شوية تاريخ العراق. كل قادة العراق الأساسيين مذبوحين مقتولين، وحتى ما نعرف مقابرهم. يعني وين مقابر العائلة المالكة؟ الآن بنوا ناحية الرمزية مقابر لهم، قتلوهم حتى أطفالهم. وين قبر عبد الكريم قاسم؟ وين حينما صارت مذابح ضد الشيوعيين في 63 آلاف الشيوعيين قتلوا؟ في عهد صدام الأنفال قتل في جنوب، قتل في كردستان، قتل في مناطق مختلفة غربية، في المناطق الغربية، الإعدامات. في الواقع الوضع العراقي الآن تحسن، يعني في التاريخ السياسي العراقي، ولفترة طويلة الآن دخلنا الانتخابات السادسة، وكل رؤساء الوزراء العراقيين، وبعضهم كانوا قاعدين هنا، السابقين والحاضر كان قاعد هنا، 6 7 رؤساء وزراء عايشين. هذا غريب في التاريخ السياسي العراقي، وإلا كلهم مقتولين القيادات السياسية. هذا معناته أكو تطور في الوضع العراقي. أنا أشوف أنه لا ندخل الدهاليز التشاؤمية للوضع العراقي، بالعكس هناك تطورات، سواء بالنسبة للمسيرة الديمقراطية والوضع العام، وضع الأمن العام، لكن عندنا أيضا نواقص. الديمقراطية شيء تراكمي، الديمقراطية عندها أيضا أمراض، وإحنا عندنا في ديمقراطيتنا أمراض الطفولة، لكن هاي تعالج من خلال المسيرة الديمقراطية.
نعم.
فأنا أرى الجانب التفاؤلي من الوضع العراقي، ولا أرى، أحسب حساب للأخطاء، لكن الجانب السلبي يغطي على الجانب الإيجابي، هذا مو صحيح.
ما عم بحاول يعني عدد السلبيات، بس عم بحاول نحكي شوي عن الاتجاه العالمي اليوم. يعني اليوم عم نسمع بالاتفاقات الأبراهيمية، وأن هذا القطار انطلق، وإذا العراق تخلف عنه سيبقى خارج هذا القطار وسيبقى في وراء. وهذه عناوين اليوم جديدة، الاتفاقات لنهاية النزاعات المسلحة في المنطقة والانتقال إلى مرحلة جديدة من الأمن والاستقرار والمصالح الاقتصادية المشتركة. قديش العراق جاهز أن يقفز إلى هذا القطار ويعقد ويكون جزء من هذه الاتفاقات اللي دول الخليج كلها دخلت لها، بالإضافة إلى مصر، ويحكى اليوم عن مجمل الدول الإسلامية في المنطقة؟
خليني أنت تسأل وزير خارجية العراق، فلازم أعبر عن السياسة العراقية
ما هي
سياسة الحكومة العراقية. أولاً إحنا عندنا قانون وطني، قانون عراقي،
نعم،
اللي يسعى إلى تطبيع مع الجانب الإسرائيلي، لأن الاتفاقات الإبراهيمية يعني بالنتيجة
هي تطبيع
والاعتراف، اللي يسعى إلى الاعتراف الجانب الإسرائيلي يعني يعدم. هذا قانون عراقي. أنا ما أشوف العراق في الوقت الحاضر كجزء من هذه المسيرة، ما أشوف العراق كجزء، ولكن الوضع المتوتر في المنطقة، العراق جزء من المنطقة، وكان هناك حرب على إيران، والآن التوترات لا زالت مستمرة، الصراعات مستمرة، التهديدات مستمرة، ونحن نتحدث عن وقف إطلاق النار، لا نتحدث عن السلم، نتحدث عن وقف إطلاق النار. فإذا كيف في الإمكان حماية العراق من الحرب وإبعاد العراق من نار الحرب؟ الأولوية والأهمية الآن هو هذا، أنه حماية المجتمع العراقي من الحروب المتوقعة أو الحرب المتوقعة، وإبعاد الساحة العراقية من نار الحرب. هاي هي الأولوية، والأولوية ليست مسألة اتفاقات الإبراهيمية. بالمناسبة هاي الاتفاقات أيضا بها مطبات، فكثير من دول الخليجية دول أخرى وصلت إلى هذه الاتفاقات، لكن لا زالت هناك صراع. الأردن عندها اتفاق، مصر عندها اتفاق، يعني اتفاقات مسبقة لهذه الفكرة في الواقع.
قبل أن أنتقل إلى الإقليم والدور الذي يمكن أن يلعبه الإقليم، قلت نحن بحالة وقف إطلاق نار. هل تعتبر أن ما حدث يعني هو ليس نهاية هذا الصراع في المنطقة؟ هل هو مقدمة لحروب أخرى شايفها جاية إلى المنطقة؟
أنا أقرأ الساحة كالآتي: أولاً، توقف المفاوضات بين الجانب الإيراني والأمريكي. كانت هناك مفاوضات في مسقط، ولكن هذه المفاوضات توقفت. ثانياً، توقف المفاوضات مع الجانب الأوروبي، الدول الثلاث، بريطانيا وفرنسا وألمانيا، بل أن هذه الدول الثلاث ذهبوا إلى مجلس الأمن وعادوا العقوبات السابقة، العقوبات اللي ترجع إلى 2015 على إيران. ثالثاً، لحد هذه اللحظة لا أرى هناك طروحات لبدء المفاوضات. الطروحات اللي تطرح من قبل الجانب الأمريكي ما مقبولة من الجانب الإيراني، والطروحات اللي تطرح من الجانب الإيراني ما مقبولة، يعني متعلقة بالمشروع النووي، متعلقة بالصواريخ البالستية، متعلقة بهذه القضايا. إذا ندرس الجانب الأوروبي والجانب الإيراني ونروح إلى الساحة الأمريكية والجانب الإيراني، نشوف هناك وصول إلى نفق مسدود. أجي إلى الجانب الإسرائيلي، التهديدات مستمرة، التهديدات مستمرة باتجاهات مختلفة، سواء باتجاه حزب الله في لبنان الآن، أو باتجاه حماس لا زال، وأيضا باتجاه إيران والمناطق الأخرى. إذن هنا مسيرة المفاوضات متوقفة. الجانب الآخر، المبدأ الأمني والعسكري اللي الإسرائيليين كانوا يستندون عليه قبل 7 أكتوبر كان مبدأ أنه التعامل مع الواقع، والواقع من وجهة نظر الإسرائيلية، يعني من المنطلق الأمني والعسكري، أنه ممكن تعامل مع حماس كما هي، أو ممكن تعامل مع حزب الله كما هي. يعني إدارة الوضع كان، فلهذا ما كانوا مهتمين. كان هناك مناوشات لكن ما كان هناك. الآن المبدأ اللي أنا أقرأ هو مبدأ الضرب أينما كان هناك تهديد، الضرب أينما كان هناك شك. الظاهر أنه المبدأ الأمني الآن اللي تعتمد عليه السياسة الأمنية والعسكرية الإسرائيلية هي مبدأ استباقي، يعني ضرب أولاً بعدين.
يعني
فلهذا قراءة المشهد صعب.
متشائم.
لأن من
أشعر
يقرر؟
أنك متشائم.
لا، أنا ما متشائم. أنا ما متشائم. الإنسان اللي سياسي ومناضل ما ممكن أنه تتشائم، لكن أنا واقعي. أنا أقرأ أنه أقرأ الظروف الموجودة في الداخل الإسرائيلي، والظروف الموجودة في الداخل الإيراني، والظروف الموجودة في المحيط الإقليمي، وأيضا ظروف واشنطن والتغييرات اللي صارت في واشنطن. فهي كلها من تجمعها. وأيضا تدرس ما حدث الحرب اللي صار على إيران 12 يوم. هل الحرب انتهت أم نحن في وقف إطلاق النار؟ وأيضا الوضع الإيراني، احنا من نتابع الوضع الإيراني نشوف أنه الإيرانيين هم لا يحبذون الحرب ولا يريدون الحرب، لكن يهيئون أنفسهم. يعني التعبئة موجودة في إيران. أنا مشكلتي أنه من أدرس هذه الأشياء وأدرس وضع الشخصي لنتنياهو في السياسة الإسرائيلية والمشاكل اللي عنده في داخل، والانتخابات القادمة في إسرائيل في السنة القادمة، كيف يتعامل مع كل هذه الأمور وهو يحس أنه لديه القوة والأمريكان محتمل ما يعارضوه. فإذا هذه الخطوات، هذه الأمور الواحد لازم يدرسها.
من هنا مع الوزير، يعني لنفترض أن إيران تعرضت لضربة، كل ما يهم إيران تعرضت لضربة ثانية، كل ما يهم العراق اليوم والأمريكيين هو أن تكون الفصائل والميليشيات في العراق محايدة، أن لا تضرب القواعد الأمريكية. الرئيس السوداني صرح خلال الانتخابات أنه شرط الفصائل ونزع سلاح هذه الفصائل أولاً أن تنسحب قوات التحالف. هل أنت من هذا الرأي؟ هل العراق يستطيع اليوم أن يحمي نفسه من داعش ومن غير داعش؟ هل تؤيدون الدعوة لانسحاب قوات التحالف التي اليوم أصبحت في إقليم كردستان؟
أولاً نحن لا ندعو إلى ضرب ولا ندعو إلى الحرب. في الواقع العراقيين كردا وعربا وجميع المكونات قاسوا من الحروب المستمرة. يعني 3-4 أجيال من العراقيين ولادتهم وتربيتهم كانت أثناء الحروب. يعني تقريبا 50 سنة هذه الدولة كانت في حروب، أما حرب مع النفس أو حرب مع الآخرين. فمبدأ الحرب مرفوض، هذا خلي يكون واضح. أما التعامل مع الداخل مثل ما قلت، بعد هذه الانتخابات وبعد تشكيل الحكومة القادمة، وحتما راح تكون الحكومة القادمة حكومة ائتلافية، أنه هذه النقاط يجب أن يطرح. يعني ما معقول فصيل معين يدخل البرلمان وعنده كتلة محتمل قوية في البرلمان ويدخل الحكومة كمان ويكون فصيل مقاوم ضد من؟
ضد إسرائيل.
إذا ضد داخل هذا ما ممكن. إذا مسألة مقاومة ضد الخارج هذا قرار حكومي، قرار الحرب والسلم قرار حكومي، هذا قرار برلمان. يعني الدستور ما يسمح. إذن يجب معالجة هذه المسألة داخليا، يعني الدخول في حوار مع هؤلاء. أما تختار الدولة أو لا دولة.
نعم.
إذا تختار الدولة، دولة عندها أسس، دولة لديها دستور، دولة لديها تعليمات، دولة لديها قيادة، دولة لديها وضوح، ودولة لديها سياسة واضحة أنه بعيد عن الحرب، أن لا ندخل الحرب. فإذا أنت تدفع المجتمع العراقي والحكومة العراقية والدولة العراقية إلى ساحة الحرب، هذا ما مقبول. إذن يجب أن نبدأ النقاش، وبدأنا النقاش سواء علنيا أو مع الأحزاب الأخرى. فهذه المسائل يجب أن تحل أولا داخليا.
نعم. مع الوزير بالكلام عن الإقليم، دائما ما نقول الإقليم أصبح نموذج للاستقرار ونموذج أكبر للتعايش والسلام ما بين المكونات. برأيك كيف استطاع الكرد أن يحموا هذا الإقليم وأن يتميز هذا الإقليم فعلا في منطقة الشرق الأوسط ويصبح الملجأ لكل هذه المكونات التي لم تشعر بالأمان في العالم العربي غير اليوم في إقليم كردستان.
أنا ما أكون موضوعي حينما أتحدث عن الإقليم، يعني
ما بدنا
تسأل واحد
احكي الحقيقة.
لكن الإقليم لأن أساس الفكرة، فكرة النضال الكردي كان مرتبط بشيئين، مرتبط بالديمقراطية وحقوق الكرد. هذا الارتباط بالديمقراطية، طبعا الديمقراطية ما ممكن إذا لم يكن هناك تعددية، سواء تعددية سياسية، تعددية قومية، والمجتمع العراقي متعدد. إذن الارتباط بالديمقراطية أساس كان، يعني أساس تربية أي إنسان سياسي في هذا المجتمع. يعني منذ تأسيس الحزب الديمقراطي الكردستاني أنه التربية كان السعي والهدف الديمقراطية، والديمقراطية في الساحة العراقية. من خلال الديمقراطية تم طرح حقوق الكرد. إذن الوصول إلى حقوق الكرد ما كان ممكن مع وجود الدكتاتورية. يجب أن الوصول إلى الديمقراطية لتثبيت حقوق الكرد. هذه التربية أنا أشوفها أدى إلى ما يلي: أولاً التسامح في الفكر، ثانياً قبول رأي الآخر باعتبار ديمقراطية يعني آراء مختلفة، ثالثاً التعايش مع الآخر، التعايش مع الآخر الضد أيضاً. والنقطة الأخرى أيضاً الإيمان بحق الذات أن يقود. يعني حينما نتحدث عن الديمقراطية وضمن الديمقراطية حقوق الكرد يجب أن تكون مضمونة، هذا معناته أنه الإيمان بحق الذات أن يقود. وهذا ترجم خلال المسيرة السياسية للحركة الكردية، بدأ باللامركزية والحكم الذاتي، وصل إلى الفيدرالية. فإذا الديمقراطية والفيدرالية هي أساس النظام الجديد في العراق وأساس الدستور. المشكلة اللي لدينا أنه لم يتم ترجمة الدستور إلى واقع، وأحياناً لم يتم الالتزام بالدستور. إذن الرجوع إلى الالتزام بالدستور أولاً، ثانياً ترجمة الدستور إلى الواقع يؤدي إلى هذه الديمقراطية اللي نسعى إليها، وأيضاً تطبيق الفيدرالية واللامركزية في مناطق أخرى من البلد. هذا ضمان لبقاء العراق، وضمان لاستمرارية النظام الديمقراطي، وضمان لتطور ليس فقط كردستان بل مناطق أخرى. أعتقد هذا التعايش السلمي في كردستان، هذا الفكر الموجود أساساً في كردستان، جذور الفكر الموجود أساساً في كردستان، أدى إلى هذا التطور في الواقع. وأيضاً أدى إلى انعكاسه على الاقتصاد، لأن الاقتصاد مو اقتصاد، يعني الأحزاب الكردية من استلموا الحكم من 1991 هم ما كانوا مسيطرين على النظام الاقتصادي، بينما في الطرف الآخر في بغداد كان كل شيء بيد الحكومة. فإذا الاقتصاد بدأ من المجتمع، وشفنا أنه القطاع الخاص تطور، القطاع الخاص تطور والقطاع العام ما كان موجود. يعني بعدين حتى لو ولد القطاع العام ضعيفاً أمام القطاع الخاص، بينما في الطرف الآخر أو الجانب الآخر من العراق القطاع العام الأساس، المركزية هي الأساس، الدولة هي يعني الحكومة هي اللي تحكم الاقتصاد. هذا الفرق واضح، لهذا نشوف أنه التطور الاقتصادي هنا والجانب الآخر يعتمد على النفط. فعندنا مشكلة في الجانب الآخر، يعني عندنا تحديات مالية اقتصادية، ويجب أن نسعى إلى هذه التغييرات أيضا في القسم الآخر من العراق.
مع الوزير، السؤال الأخير: أسمع منذ تقريبا 20 عاما الكلام عن الدستور، أسمع الرئيس مسعود برزاني يطالب بشيء واحد: تطبيق الدستور، وأنتم خذلتم من الحكومات المتعاقبة، لم يطبق هذا الدستور وبقي الظلم لاحقا بهذا الإقليم. اليوم انتصرتوا بأكثر من 1,000,000 صوت. الحزب الديمقراطي اليوم في خلال هذه الانتخابات فاجأ الجميع وتعدى 1,000,000 صوت. كيف ستفرضون أو كيف ستضمنون في تشكيل الحكومة الجديدة أن لا يتم التراجع مرة جديدة عن حقوق الكرد في الدستور وليس خارج الدستور؟
نحتاج إلى الآتي. أولاً، أنا ما أتحدث عن وحدة الصف الكردي، أتحدث عن وحدة الموقف على الأقل. وحدة الصف صعب، لكن وحدة الموقف ممكن أنه يكون هناك وحدة للموقف في الساحة الكردستانية. ثانياً، بناء تحالفات قوية مع أحزاب قوية في بغداد، وهناك الأكراد لديهم حلفاء لا زالوا في بغداد وحلفاء أقوياء. أما حلفاء مستند على المبدأ أو على المصلحة، لكن النتيجة نفس الشيء. يعني نبني النفس الذات، والذات نحتاج إلى حكومة ائتلافية في كردستان وتعاون بين الأحزاب الكردستانية، وخاصة بين الحزبين الديمقراطي والاتحاد الوطني. ونحتاج إلى وحدة الموقف في بغداد، ونحتاج إلى حلفاء أقوياء في بغداد. والحلفاء أعتقد في المرحلة القادمة هم في انتظار العامل الكردي، والعامل الكردي يستطيع أن، أو اللاعب الكردي يستطيع أن يكون لاعباً مهماً في المرحلة القادمة في بغداد.
نعم، باختصار سريع، هل يمكن تحقيق السلام والأمن في العراق من دون تحقيق السلام بين بغداد والإقليم؟
لا وجود للحرب بين الإقليم وبغداد، حتى أن
ما عم بحكي عن السلام بمعنى القصد،
هناك
السلام
مشاكل
السياسي.
هناك مشاكل بين الإقليم وبغداد، ولكن تحقيق السلام بصورة عامة في بغداد يعتمد أيضاً على المنطقة، على المحيط الإقليمي. فإذا يجب أن يكون للعراق أيضاً دوراً في، أو على الأقل للحكومة العراقية الحالية والقادمة، أن يكون لهذه الحكومة دوراً واضحاً في إبعاد الساحة العراقية عن أي حرب في المنطقة. وشكراً.
شكراً لك.
هلا بك.
شكراً للحضور الكرام، ونتابع البرنامج المخصص لهذا الموضوع. شكراً.
No. Oh. Hello, everybody. Sorry you caught the tail end of our little side chat. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for having me here. Quite a tough discussion, I think, lies ahead of us, with its official title being Mediation and Conflict Containment in the Middle East. And I think this goes a bit to what some of our distinguished speakers were saying earlier, in that, we talk about containing conflict as opposed to actually resolving conflict. But things are actually changing. Things are shifting in what some would argue is quite a seismic way, especially given the post-October 7th fallout. And many will argue that when it comes to Israel-Palestine and what's happening in Gaza, is one of the biggest threats and arguably one of the biggest mediation challenges. And this is not just in terms of what Israel has done to Gaza, which many credible organizations, including the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry, human rights organizations, international organizations, but also Israeli human rights organizations themselves have called a genocide. And I think all of us who are experts on the region know exactly how those actions and what is happening in Gaza can be manipulated by any nefarious group, including ISIS, which, as we heard this morning from His Excellency President Barzani, will use the slaughter and oppression of a population as a major recruitment tool. And beyond that, we also have, when it comes specifically to mediation, this somewhat fascinating medley of mediations, not just between regional countries, but inter-country mediations. We have the involvement of new and changing outside players. And we have mediations that are being held in the region for countries that are on the outside. And so when we're talking about what role does mediation play in regional peace building, we need to look at it in very much of a sort of multi-tiered fashion. And actually, I want to start with Your Excellency Abdulaziz. The Qatari Prime Minister, following the Israeli strikes and assassination attempts on the Hamas mediators, and all of our condolences for that and what your country went through, suggested that countries across the Middle East must come together to rein in Israel. He said, "Today we have reached a turning point for there to be a response from the entire region against such barbaric conduct." I wanted to ask you, are we seeing more of that, more of a coming together from regional countries, more solidarity or more engagement in the mediation space? And what have you learned from your country's experience in the Gaza-Israel mediation space?
بالنسبة لنا الجواب باختصار نعم. قاعدين نحن نشهد مشهد تجمع أكثر وأكثر في مقابل مثل هذه التصرفات اللي لديها ضوء أخضر بلا حسيب ولا رقيب. ولكن هل هذه المواقف بقوة كافية للتعامل مع هذا الموضوع؟ أنا أعتقد لا. لازلنا بحاجة إلى تجمع أكبر، لازلنا محتاجين إلى توافقية أكبر، لازلنا محتاجين إلى موقف أكثر حزماً في اتجاه أو في التعامل مع مثل هذه الأمور. اليوم هذا الاعتداء إذا مر بدون حسيب ولا رقيب وبهذا النوع من الضوء الأخضر راح يفتح المجال وراح يحول المنطقة إلى غابة يسود فيها القوي على الضعيف ويأكل فيها القوي الضعيف. لذلك احنا اليوم في منطقة الشرق الأوسط بشكل عام محتاجين إلى إطار أمني شامل. هذا الإطار الأمني الشامل يجمع الجميع ولا يستثني منا أحد. هذا الإطار الأمني الشامل يحفظ الحد الأدنى من سلامة وأمن هذه الدول التي ستكون طرف في هذا الإطار الأمني الشامل. لا يمكن للمنطقة أنها تستمر بهذه الطريقة. إحنا اليوم قاعدين نواجه 5 عوامل قاتلة في المنطقة. جالسين نتعامل مع سياسة رد فعلية في مقابل الاستباقية. جالسين نتعامل مع توجه انكفائي في مقابل انك انت تكون مهتم بالآخر كما تهتم بنفسك. جالسين نتعامل مع مناطق بروكسي ومناطق حروب بالوكالة أصبحت متناثرة في الشرق الأوسط. جالسين نتكلم عن نون ستيت أكترز في كثير من هذه الدول. إذا استمرت هذه الأمور في غياب إطار أمني شامل ستعاني المنطقة وسيستمر معاناة المنطقة لفترة طويلة كثير. هذه العوامل أثرت على قضية التنمية في الشرق الأوسط، عطلت هذه التنمية، عطلت المشاريع الاقتصادية، خلت كثير من الدول تعاني معاناة شديدة في كثير من جوانبها في الوقت اللي احنا كلنا محتاجين فيه ان احنا ننمو ونتطور.
Thank you for that. Some very interesting and very valid points that you do bring up, which kind of gets me to something else that I want to tackle, because everything then becomes more difficult when, on top of these efforts that are happening, you have someone like, let's face it, President Trump, love him or hate him, who does come in with something of a sledgehammer. And sir, your country has faced this. You have faced the pressure of the United States president quite literally telling Jordan and Egypt that if they don't sign up to this peace deal, the Trump peace plan, and this was earlier in the year, the United States is going to withhold aid from your country. I mean, how do you even navigate that kind of a situation? And, I've been to Gaza 7 times since October 7th, and I have seen what happens there, and I don't want to knock any effort that kind of is going to bring about an end to it. But at the same time, we have to take into consideration what kind of mediation actually exists if it's mediation under threat.
Thank you so much, Arwa. And allow me just at the outset to salute my brother and friend, His Excellency Prime Minister Masroor Barzani, and to thank him for this invitation and this outstanding forum and organizing this forum and the team that has really brought me again into contact with many of my friends, whether in the Kurdistan region or Iraq or the world at large. It's a very interesting question. And the issue is that fundamentally, I think the leadership in Jordan managed to just navigate the pathway with a lot of wisdom, with a lot of courage, and with a lot of convincing on the front of, because remember, at that point in time, the discussion was fundamentally a mass exodus of the population from Gaza to Jordan and Egypt, and we were quite steadfast in embracing a unified position with Egypt that this is not going to happen, because this would existentially threaten the prospect of a two-state solution by facilitating the process of a mass exodus out of Gaza. And in as much as Jordan is concerned, this would have been a prelude that would certainly have impacted the West Bank. In the case of Egypt, certainly Sinai and also broader national security issues pertaining to certain shades of political Islam that they don't want to have leak into Egypt in general terms. And with talking a lot of sense in that particular dimension by pointing out that reconstruction is not mutually exclusive to the continuation of the existence and presence of the Gazans in the Gaza Strip. Now, oftentimes, the titles that we deal with in sessions don't necessarily end up being the exact titles of the discussions. Ahmed Daoud Oghlu correctly pointed to the fact that fundamentally we're talking about the management of chaos. And yes, even the Security Council resolution yesterday, if you allow me to just point to that, I believe that the Council's resolution has a measure of creative ambiguity that can certainly be built upon. And for it to be built upon, I think that the Arabs, in particular, need to maintain the lowest common denominator that was omnipresent in their meeting on the margins of the General Assembly with President Trump on the eve of him announcing the 20-point plan. What the Middle East needs today is fundamentally a comprehensive regional architecture, not a comprehensive security structure, but maybe a comprehensive regional architecture that has a political and intelligence tier, that has a military tier, that has a developmental tier, that has a socioeconomic tier. But for that to happen, you should generate a lot of buy-ins. It should be, I guess, predicated on the principle of non-intervention in domestic affairs of state, strengthening the national state, combating sub-state actors, accepting fully and engaging in incrementalism vis-a-vis freezing the status quo today by the Israelis so that they enable the viability of a premise of a two-state solution in the future at some point, so that they can be part of the order along with Turkey, along with Iran, and also to basically really preserve the international order as we knew it and we saw it evolve post-Second World War, rather than upending that order and having differentiated application of the rules of the order to many, but to the exclusion of others. And coupled with that, then you can build economically on other issues. And that's the fundamental major enabler then through that incrementalism that has to be, again, conditional, irreversible, and comprehensive, and contingent on giving in terms of concessions and engagement.
When it comes to engagement, you know, a lot of countries in the region do turn still, to a lesser degree, but they still turn to the United States. And there is this sense that, you know, Big Brother America, you know, is going to be coming in and saving us and protecting us. And here in, you know, Iraqi Kurdistan, there is, and I completely understand the logic behind it, a desire for, you know, U.S. troops to remain, especially because of the threat that might be emerging from ISIS. And I know that it's absolutely no laughing matter. I mean, I was here when ISIS forces almost arrived to the gates of Erbil. But my question is, do we need to start shifting away, Your Excellency Safin, away from such reliance on the United States and perhaps looking more either internally or elsewhere so that, you know, the region isn't continuously, and let's call it what it is, having to bend the metaphorical knee in front of the whims of an ever-changing White House?
Addressed to me? Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, being here at MEPS. I think this morning, Sayyid Ammar Hakim, he mentioned there has to be a common ground or common understanding for peace and stability. Indeed, the region in itself, with local actors, state actors, non-state actors, global actors, it has contributed to the developments, sometimes positive, sometimes not so positive. Now, when it comes to common understanding, indeed, we need to have that understanding. We should be reading from the same dictionary how peace is defined. A definition of peace: stability, security, prosperity, fraternity, coexistence. We have to be reading that from the same dictionary, not everybody having their own interpretation. At the end of the day, when we talk about conflict resolution, who are the ones who are sitting at the table to bring about peace? Aren't they the same people who are the root cause of the problems in the first place? So this is a very delicate situation, and the region is very volatile, and I would say it's shark-infested waters. And it's always difficult to swim or to navigate in this shark-infested waters. When it comes to troops or presence of international coalition forces, primarily the United States, I think experience tells us that things have to be in the right place before next move is taken. 2011 is a good example when the United States contributed to the development and the building of the new federal army, armed to the teeth with the most modern weapons. And it was only 3 years later, when the United States left in 2011, prematurely, I would say.
Yes.
It was only 3 years later when a third of Iraqi territory fell into the hands of a ragtag militia or terrorist group known as Daesh. They managed to get the best and the most modern weaponry system of the United States from the Iraqi army, and they had the best of the former Soviet weapons in Syria. Over 1,700 APCs was in their possession, and this is why we in Kurdistan, we had difficulty to stopping them in the first place. But with the support of the international coalition and the Peshmergas, believe me, there were Peshmergas who were retired in their 70s. There were those who were living in comfort of the Western world, but they came back and they volunteered, they went to the front line, and some of them were killed in action. So the presence of such a force, we in Kurdistan, we look at it not just because it brings us some security or guarantee, but it's a must, not only for Kurdistan, but for all of Iraq. Therefore, continuation of this presence, as it was said this morning with President Masoud Barzani, in a different format. Bilateral relations, agreements between Iraq, United States, or EU, or NATO, within whatever format, but such a presence is a must, until such a time when, indeed, Iraq's own army, an independent and a sovereign army, is ready to combat any threats, both within and outside. Prior to 2014, we had the federal army, and unfortunately, what happened in Mosul is very clear. But currently, we have an alternative army. You know, the federal army is being sidelined. I'm sorry to say this, but it is marginalized. And there are other forces. I also have to give credit to some of the members of Hashd al-Sha'bi who fought bravely, but there are forces with sinister intention, and their loyalty does not lie with Iraq. Therefore, it is important to upgrade the level of the Iraqi army to truly be a federal army that protects Iraq within and its borders. To answer you short, yes, we believe the presence of coalition forces within different structure, different format in Iraq for now and the foreseeable future is a must.
I feel as if we could have also been having this conversation, though, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and maybe that goes towards, moves us back towards the concept of mediation, and how actually for the kind of stability that one needs, you also do need to have localized mediations happening on a much more robust level, especially when it comes to a place that has the sort of history that Iraq has. But either way, we are seeing these shifting, sands, and the colors of the Middle East, and the alliances are constantly changing and shifting. And I wanted to ask you, Luigi Di Maio, you said actually in a recent interview, I happened to catch part of it. It was actually my former employer, CNN, You were highlighting a different aspect of the sort of mediation efforts in the region, and you were talking about the role that the GCC had played in the Russia-Ukraine prisoner exchange. Are you sort of, as the EU representative to the GCC, seeing what kinds of shifts are you seeing in the region when it comes to willingness to play a bigger or have a bigger mediation role? And I mean, to a certain degree, some will say it's, you know, taking ownership of your own backyard, which I also feel does come across as a bit condescending to some. But at the same time, it is to a certain degree a shift that needs to be seen if we're going to really see the region move into something that is going to be much more effective for the people of the region itself.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Let me thank, first of all, Prime Minister Barzani and Mr. Hussein for this invitation. Perhaps it's my first time at this forum, my second time in Kurdistan. I'm very proud of being here. And obviously, your question testifies already the shift. I traveled the region, and I'm traveling the region since 2018, when I was a Minister of Industry of Italy, and then I traveled as Minister of Foreign Affairs, and now as EU Special Representative. And I would say between 2020 and 2023, in this region, we experienced, let's say the wider Gulf region, we experienced this big sense of leadership linked to many region-led processes. The economic agenda of Iraq, the Baghdad Conference, the reapproachment of many Gulf states with Iran, the reapproachment of many Gulf states with Turkey, the reapproachment within the GCC countries with the Alula agreements, the unilateral ceasefire in Yemen, and so on, the Abraham Accords, and even the announced normalization between Saudi, only announced, and Israel. So we were experiencing this sense of hope that something was happening in terms of creating the real structured and lasting architecture of security of this region. But honestly, it was very, probably too optimistic to look at all these processes like the formation of the new security architecture, because everyone in the region was telling me already at the time, look, without fixing the Palestinian issue, the architecture of security in this region is very hard to achieve. And this is the main pillar that was discussed by all the speakers today. And in my opinion, we can agree at unanimity that without fixing that issue, we will never have a real architecture of security for the Middle East. That said, I have to say that our friends in the Gulf are helping us, Europeans. For instance, you mentioned Ukraine, Russia in mediation and facilitation for many issues. Together with Turkey, the most important players in terms of swap of prisoners between Russia and Ukraine were Saudi and UAE. The return of children, Ukrainian children from Russia to Ukraine, was facilitated by Qatar. And you can see how our relation in mediation and facilitation is going even beyond the region. And honestly, even with US and Qatar facilitated Rwanda, DRC in Africa, or you see Pakistan, Afghanistan, and many other kind of important initiatives that sometimes are achieving goals, some other times can fail, but it's the effort that is at the core. What I'm saying is that, yes, I see the shift, but of course, altogether we have to fix the issue. And using now the Trump plan, altogether, we have to put energies, human resources, funds, and diplomacy in order to make sustainable the plan that is not only the ceasefire in Gaza, but it's something that is going beyond and has to achieve the real goal of two-state solution between Israel and Palestine.
I just wanted to ask you a brief follow-up, because a lot of what you're talking about has been sort of reactive mediation in the sense that, you know, we watch the tensions beginning to rise, and then that mediation step doesn't happen until afterwards. And we also would be remiss if we didn't, in the context of mediation, talk about, you know, what's been happening in Sudan. Are you leveraging your ties with the UAE to try to bring about some sort of, resolution mediation?
The Horn of Africa is a perimeter of another colleague that is working on the Horn of Africa since many years. But what can I say? What I can say on that, in general, on the region, is that in terms of mediation and facilitation of efforts, now, for instance, with some of the GCC countries, we are speaking about training together mediators, no? Because they are so involved in these mediations that sometimes in order to implement, we can implement together. But it always surprised me, and it applies all the countries of the region, is that in mediation and facilitation, directly the leaders are mediating and facilitating. It's something very different compared to some other kind of diplomatic efforts in mediation and facilitation when you send first the teams, the lower level of the diplomats, then the higher level, and then it comes the leader to sign. It's really reversed, and I appreciate a lot it, and I think it's very effective, and as European member states and European countries, we are working more and more on that because we recognize a mutual beneficial in that.
Thank you. Mr. Burhan, I wanted to ask you, so then, obviously Turkey has played a significant role center stage, mediating a number of things, but how do we then sort of shift in our thinking so that we're not necessarily focusing so much on reactionary mediation, but rather preventative mediation? What needs to actually change in the way that things are being done?
Thank you very much, Arwa. First of all, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to
I don't think your mic is.
Yep.
There we go.
Can
Talk
you hear?
straight into it. Yep.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Prime Minister Barzani for inviting us to this beautiful program. We had a chance to meet very important friends. I'd like to take a very general glance at it, actually, Arwa, if you allow me. The perspective we see, the world is actually undergoing a critical period of transformation. We should not miss this one. And as you said, the power balances are shifting, the international commercial relations are being restructured, and the new alignments, especially trade-basis alliances, are emerging across the global landscape. So we can actually describe this, I actually describe this in a way like as if it's a threshold in which that the old world order has faded, yet the new order has not taken fully shape. So to use that conceptual framework, often expressed as order, disorder, and reorder, we should actually remember that the world is currently experiencing the stage of disorder. So and right at the very heart of it, of this transformation, lies our region, the Middle East. So when we talk about the issues about Middle East, I believe that we should take that, whatever we speak, whatever we say, actually is to have a big effect on the new global order, basically. So, and we have a lot of issues, as mentioned, the Russian-Ukraine war that we have witnessed, and we had a lot of effects of it in the region. We should not forget the growing competition over the energy resources of Eastern Mediterranean when we are talking about Middle East. And we should remember also the contestation over the trade corridors, especially in business, connecting the East and the West. Of course, then I must say the unresolved status or the feature of the Syrian state's structure for the future. And of course, maybe the most importantly is the escalations between Israel and the other regional actors over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and its potential implications politically over the region. So when we look at it, all of these indicate that actually the key variables, all of these key variables defining the new shape of the new world order, actually are right in the middle of our region, precisely within our geography. So it is to me that it is very clear that the new order cannot be resolved by a single equation. It is rather a complex system of interdependent equations, each influencing the others. So we must decide first if, as a region, we will be the passive observers of this new order taking shape, or we will act, we will be the actors shaping its foundation for the future. This is the reality that we need to put in place. If we decide this first, then we can start talking other things, that how we are going to unite, or how we will import other solutions to resolve our problems as we've done it many times in the past. And these are all repeated actions that we tried in the past, which never worked out. So this is a definition that we need to make first. So answering those questions, to be honest, I believe that we deserve as a region to come together, because the region remains, unfortunately, as it has been long, it remains as a dense terrain of competing interest. So what we need today is actually not a competition, it's actually a cooperation. So we need to talk about which parts that we need to run this cooperation.
Yeah, and we do hear a lot of talk about, what is needed, and, the region knows what the region needs. Sir, Mr. Abdelaziz, you pointed this out. You need more support. Everyone here knows that Qatar needs more support, for example, and yet we don't really see it materialize. So what, in your opinion, needs to actually happen so that all of these efforts that are being put forward in the mediation space don't actually result in a new accepted norm that is actually unacceptable?
أنا أتفق معك. إحنا اليوم أنا أتمنى في يوم من الأيام إن إحنا ما نحتاج حتى نعمل الميديشن. إذا ما احتجنا الميديشن معناه أن المنطقة تعيش بأمن والاستقرار. الدعم اللي اليوم حصلناه بعد الضربة الإسرائيلية في خلال أيام صارت في قمة خليجية، قمة عربية، قمة إسلامية، 57 دولة حضروا هذه التجمع أو هذه القمم الثلاثة، ولكن في نهاية هذه القمم بكل اجتماع هذه الدول استمرت العنجهية والغدر الإسرائيلي والحرب على غزة، وأدى إلى ما نشاهده اليوم، ونتمنى إن شاء الله أن بالفعل هذا الأمر يتغير بتغير جذري. لذلك احنا محتاجين ان احنا ننتقل من قضية الحديث عن الأزمات والحديث عن عدم الاستقرار والحديث عن الحاجة إلى إطار أمني شامل في هذه المنطقة، إلى أن احنا بالفعل نبدأ بتأسيس هذه المنظومة، منظومة الأمن الشامل. إذا ما اشتغلنا على هذا الأمر، وهذا اللي دعا له سمو الأمير في مؤتمر ميونخ الأمني في ميونخ، قال إحنا المنطقة بحاجة إلى إطار أمني شامل inclusive يشمل الجميع. بهذا الإطار الأمني الشامل فقط نستطيع أن احنا بالفعل يكون في هناك شيء عملي على أرض الواقع يؤدي إلى مزيد من الاستقرار، ويخلي الدول تنتبه إلى منظوماتها التنموية وتضع مصادرها ومواردها في هذا الاتجاه، بدل اتجاه الانكفاء للداخل والحروب بالوكالة والدمار اللي قاعد يحصل في هذه المنطقة والنتائج اللي احنا شايفينها اليوم.
Your Excellency, Safin, we're talking about sort of proactive mediation too, and perhaps one example of that is actually the efforts that are happening vis-a-vis the SDF in Syria and Damascus, these trilateral talks between the U.S., Syria, and Turkey. But if we look at that, and then there were obviously the fairly successful so far at least, negotiations between Turkey and the PKK ending, 40 decades of conflict. But if we look at that sort of proactive role, what are other areas where we can actually try to increase the role that mediation can play proactively before we reach these complete and total breaking points?
I think the efforts that has been underway, particularly with Turkey, it's not the first time that they have embarked on this path. It's the third round of peace talks, 2009, 2013, and currently. It seems that on this occasion, there is more hope. There's a special commission that has been set up in the parliament, which covers more or less 95% of all the political parties represented in the parliament. So that in itself, there is a political support across the board. There's also one good thing about it. The mainstream opposition, if I can say ultra-nationalist, MHP, are fully on board and they have spearheaded this effort. Thirdly, there is a consensus amongst the public in Turkey in support of ending conflict, bloodshed, and 40 years of confrontation to lead to peace, stability, coexistence. Now, what is being shared in this special commission, whether there will be amendment to the constitution, there will be new laws, I don't have privy to that. But the process in itself is a good one, and it should be welcomed, supported. Here in Kurdistan, President Masoud Barzani at the top, he has been supportive. The KRI President Nechirvan, the Prime Minister Masroor Barzani, and all political parties in Kurdistan are supportive of this initiative. And whatever is needed from our side, we are ready to help in order to end this 4 decades of bloodshed and bring stability and to promote coexistence and fraternity and economical development. Currently, we enjoy extremely good relation with Turkey, economically, socially, politically, and I think there's room to even improve that further with the rest of Iraq. On Syria, right from day one in 2011, when things started to unfold, the advice from the leadership here to the Kurdish population and political elite in Syria was to unite their front and either to be part of mainstream opposition or whatever format that will, in due course, would allow them to negotiate some rights for the Kurds in Syria. And unfortunately, until recently, PYD, YPG, and then it ended up as being SDF, was monopolizing the power. And they denied other political parties to be active and engaged. There were 3 conferences in Erbil and in Dahok several years ago under the auspices of President Masoud Barzani to bring these groups together. Unfortunately, agreements were reached, but it was not adhered to.
Yeah,
currently, where we are, I think some positive steps have been taken. 10th of March, there was an agreement between Mazloum Abdi and President Shara. There are good points within that agreement which needs to be honored. Now, the state has probably the key responsibility, the upper hand, in order to implement and gradually to bring the country back together. But the rapid, let's say, constitution that was passed and the rapid government that was formed, and this worked against the grains and the spirit of that agreement. Syria is an important country in the region, and it is, yes, it still has the title Syrian Arab Republic, but it's not only Arabs live in Syria. I think a lot can be done in order to make sure that other people, other communities in Syria have the sense of belonging, whether the Durzis, the Alawis, the Kurds, the Christians, to feel to be part of the future and to be more comprehensive. Positive steps have been taken, and I think the opening up to the West, to the current regime, that in itself is good, but I think any future support there has to be certain, I don't want to say conditions, but certain elements attached to it, that benchmarks to be set whereby Syria can reach that, and then the West will open up more and more, and for the Kurdish people to enjoy their rights and other communities. So we are very supportive, and there is a in the last year or so, there is a good communication between SDF and KRG and the leadership here. We are encouraging them that they should approach Damascus and their issues should be settled in Damascus, and there's a good opportunity for that.
I'm going to throw this question to you. Sorry to put you on the hot seat, but do you not feel as if kind of what is also missing in the mediation space is, and I spend a lot of time just talking to people outside of the political spheres, and I feel as if there is always this great disconnect that exists between what the mediators are trying to accomplish, those who are mediating, and that one of the reasons why mediation perhaps doesn't always stick is because it's not actually taking the population's realities and their own desires into consideration. And we are at great risk of doing that again when it comes to what's happening in Gaza.
Certainly. And you've basically placed the question before with Luigi when you asked about anticipatory, preventative mediation. Because I think every single situation has a special recipe. For example, you have sometimes voluntary mediation that yields results. In other cases, fundamentally, mediation becomes an alternative word to managing a situation rather than resolving the core of the question. So basically, to cut the chase, in the context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which has been now raging for more than 70 years, I think it is exactly not addressing the root cause directly and attempting to manage the situation in a manner that is not satisfactory to meeting the legitimate grievances of the Palestinians, and concurrently address all of the legitimate security grievances that Israel has, is what led us to a failure and repeated sequences of failures. I would frankly dare to say that the emergence of sub-state actors, whether Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Hamas movement in Gaza, or a horde of other groups in the 50s and the 60s in the Arab region, were fundamentally the product of the continuation of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory in the West Bank and in Gaza, and consistently the refusal of Israel to engage and to satisfy the legitimate Palestinian grievances and to fundamentally cut the chase. My concern with the landscape that's set out today in the plan is that if it does not continue with the same momentum and rigor, and fundamentally the mediator, the US in this particular case, and President Trump, does not come down forcefully in his meditation in the direction of forcing Israel to engage in reproducing a certain political horizon, leading to addressing and resolving at some point in the future, and when everything is aligned, the legitimate grievances of the Palestinians, it is almost inconceivable that we will see a resurgence to violence, a resurgence of violence in Gaza, probably the emergence of a whole conglomerate of sub-state actors, terrorist groups, that would further basically take this entire region into mayhem. There are other mediations in which you basically have interventions that are fundamentally predicated on the will of parties, once they detect that there is tension, to invite a third party with credibility to come in and try to bridge ideas. And this form of mediation is a mediation that's fundamentally always workable. In this region, again, the root cause of the emergence of sub-state actors, tension, is in many instances the product of Israeli occupation, Israeli policies. Southern Lebanon produced Hezbollah. The lack of investment in the success of the Oslo process led to the emergence of Hamas. And of course, it did give a lot of gravitas for certain detractors in the region who have other agendas, including some neighboring countries, to fundamentally use all of those grievances as a magnet that would serve their causes and objectives, while posturing that they are serving the Palestinian grievance, while all of that propaganda centers around their self-interest as opposed to serving the legitimate Palestinian grievances. The region today is at crossroads. Either this effort particularly carries a lot of momentum, leads to really what is needed, the establishment, and again, I want to repeat, a comprehensive regional architecture, because it cannot be exclusively one that looks at security alone. It has to be security, it has to be the satisfaction of political grievances, it has to have the developmental energy component, technology component, for it to basically then become self-sustaining. But you cannot erect today this architecture, in my own estimation, absent the forceful intervention of a power like the US, the Europeans in certain instances vis-à-vis others, and fundamentally, some of the countries that do have diplomatic relations with Israel today, including Jordan, including Egypt, including Emirates, including Bahrain, including Morocco.
Let me put this back to you then. Given that everything that has been highlighted now, especially with the need for sort of a power like the U.S. and the EU, do you see a scenario where the EU is actually stepping in?
Honestly, historically, we had very good relations with each one of the countries that is in this, let's say, equation of security, is involved in this equation of security. But recently, it improved massively. For instance, with Jordan, we just signed a very important strategic partnership with Egypt as well. We are going to negotiate with the GCC, with Iraq. Recently, they had in Brussels a very high-level meeting with our commission. So the relations are improving because we are convinced that the more we improve bilaterally, the more we can work even multilaterally in order to face the multilateral challenges. But let me say something on this inclusiveness that the former Prime Minister of Jordan was mentioning. Today I saw during the debate that when it comes to economics, there is a sort of reaction categorizing it on a secondary level, because it's like to speak about business as usual. But corridors economics are dividends of peace. And without creating a framework of peace dividends, we cannot create the peace and the stability of the region. This is why the development road, IMEC, all the projects between Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, all these projects are very important in order first to interconnect more and more the several countries. I would say a little bit as we did with the single market in Europe after the Second World War, in order to stabilize a little bit the competition. And second is really, in the eyes of the youth, is the real hope for the future, is the development for the future. So obviously they have to go hand in hand. But look at the debate now for the reconstruction of Gaza. I hear more and more in the region, we don't want to build if we are not sure that will be not destroyed again. So it means that on one side we have the reconstruction, that is even economics, because we have companies, funds, and so on to put together. But on the other side, we need the political path for making sustainable that peace and for attracting the actors that will rebuild, will reconstruct not only Gaza, I would say even the Palestine of the future, let's say that.
Which also, though, lends itself to a very risky space, because Israel for a long time has said, well, we can't negotiate with the Palestinians because there isn't a unified Palestinian entity to negotiate with. If we allow this peace process or the reconstruction process to be halted and not be able to move forward because of what could possibly and highly likely will emerge as a similar argument of, well, we haven't cleared out Hamas from Gaza, or whatever it is that, the Israeli side decides that it wants to say, or the lack of countries wanting to put forward, their own troops with the international peace force. I mean, we're also at this point where we're at a huge risk of, the cycle repeating itself again, but in this current reality we're in, not in the pre-October 7th one.
But let's say that now, thanks God, we have a common framework to implement. That is this plan where we have Israel, Palestine, the Arab world, Europeans, the allies of the United States all together. And we have to make sustainable this plan in order to avoid what you were saying, that the resumption of the tensions, the resumption of the conflict. And on that, I think we can succeed only with an holistic approach, not only a securitarian, not only an economic, not only a political diplomatic approach, but holistic approach is fundamental.
And I understand that, but I mean, comprehensive is also such a catchword, right? I mean, let's be realistic, Mr. Burhan, like what actually needs to happen? Countries need to take very hard decisions. They need to act with moral courage instead of personal vested interests. I mean, how do we break the cycle within these countries in the region and beyond? And I'm going to put you in the hot seat for that one.
I had a problem with my left earring today, so that's why I just needed to have your
I thought you weren't understanding.
The voice doesn't come through. First of all, Arwa, I think we need to set our unifying platform altogether in the region. We've tried this in the past many times, but we couldn't achieve it because we established our unifying platform some of the time on our religion. Of course, the vast majority of the region belonging to the same faith, and this is a powerful unifying element. But we have tried this in the past many times, that we've seen some political Islamist movements in the region that affected a lot. But however, their trials did not evolve beyond temporary experiments, unfortunately. And they remained romantic and confrontational. So we should, first of all, set a unifying platform for all the people in the region, not necessarily the countries, not necessarily the politicians of the countries, but the people of our region, basically. So, and that unifying platform that we define should not be exclusionary, as it has been in the past for those who do not share it. In other words, maybe we should take the pride in belonging to the same values. However, we should not use those as a tool of dominance or a threat for those who do not share the same common ground, if you know what I mean. So I believe we should define a regional wealth. First of all, we should not import solutions. We should not import solutions because those remedies, external remedies, may keep some people or some countries happy in short term. However, we've seen in the past that we actually have that problem eventually and ultimately that takes the region into deeper ends. And we basically it becomes a shackles upon our own feet. And this happened many times. So we should find the results on our own, first of all. This is what I would say. But how? Of course, we should develop regional programs, socio-economic programs, as has been said, that we have some ideas for those, like, I mean, we can work on the harmonization of the custom services through the countries, for example, between Syria and Turkey, or maybe between Kurdistan and Turkey, there may be a joint free zones, because that economic integration is quite important for people to be familiar with. It's not only the countries, it's not only the politicians to talk, that the people need to talk. So we should make this, we should enable this first in the region, I believe. And then maybe some regional economic integration programs also for the youth and the capitals, that we can establish joint programs and funds that we haven't witnessing. All of these are even important from our side for our region. For example, we have World Bank making, opening credit lines for all these countries in here, or the Asian banks and so. But first of all, we should establish our own development banks, maybe, as all these regional countries. That is actually a shame, because we do not have that properly, if you know what I mean. So, unfortunately, we share the history, the culture, collective memory. For example, I am here in Kurdistan today with a big happiness. But I don't know why we do not so much integrate any further economically and socially, that we are actually missing this. Because there's that competition to keep the imported solutions in place, rather than trying to find our own solutions, I think.
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately we're out of time, but I just want to say one thing also, because I would be remiss if I didn't. Another big aspect, obviously, when it comes to inclusion, is women.
Absolutely.
And we know, and studies have shown, that when women are included in peace processes, they have a significantly higher chance of success. And so while I do wish all the best for everybody...
They're wiser and more sincere.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Also, I think we have a thicker skin because our egos don't get hurt as easily, but that's a different topic altogether. But I would also want to urge everybody who's involved in this space to make space actually for women to also be sitting at the negotiating table, because ultimately we are half the population. And that's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our distinguished guests and to Ms. Arwa Damon for chairing this important session. We will now take a 10-minute coffee break. Please be back in the hall as we continue with our next session. Thank you.
مهوان برس أمنها دخلك نوفراك قهوة دبرين.
سيداتي وسادتي، سنأخذ الآن استراحة لشرب القهوة لمدة 10 دقائق.